Everything we do, yeah, we connected, yeah. Love each other, make the world go round. From them birds that's flying to us walking on the ground. What I didn't know, I know it now. Everything we do, yeah, is connected. Love each other, make the world go round. From them birds that's flying to us walking on the ground. What I didn't know, I know it now. Yeah, I didn't know what I did on this earth affected others, it can help, it can hurt. Wildlife is all around us, so diverse. They depend on us and love and make it work. Yeah, in their natural habitat they flourish. It's gonna take a little bit of courage. We can coexist and it'll be beautiful. I'ma pass it on so that you can know. Everything we do, yeah, we connected, yeah. Love each other, make the world go round. From them birds that's flying to us walking on the ground. What I didn't know, I know it now. Everything we do, yeah, is connected. Love each other, make the world go round. From the birds that's flying to us walking on the ground. What I didn't know, I know it now. Everything we do, yeah, we connected, yeah. Love each other, make the world go round. From them birds that's flying to us walking on the ground. What I didn't know, I know it now. Everything we do, yeah, is connected. Love each other, make the world go round. From the birds that's flying to us walking on the ground. What I didn't know, I know it now. We can coexist and it'll be beautiful. We can coexist and it'll be beautiful. We can coexist and it'll be beautiful.
This is Warren Dixon, hip-hop artist and co-owner of Third Rock Hip Hop, an environmental education company where we teach the kids in an entertaining way how we can better take care of the environment around us. I first got involved in this space because I seen that there was a lack of people like us, black and brown people, in this space. And I knew that it was going to be important to the future generations to see people like us caring about things like this and doing the work. Now, in doing this work, I seen how it changed my mentality, but also how it changed my life and the people mentalities and lives around me. And something that I wish I would have known before is that choosing a path is not just about financial gain, but it's also about the impact that it makes on the people around you. So that means that we're changing the world with our decisions, and we're changing the future for all of us.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. It's fantastic to be able to be with each and every one of you as we are in this transformational moment. And we know transformation can't happen without historically Black colleges and universities, Hispanic Serving Institutions, and tribal colleges. So we're just, just incredibly blessed to be able to hold space with you tonight. And we were also blessed to hear those words from our brother. You know, there's a quote that says music, it says all the things that words can never do. And it helps us to connect, to uplift, to be transformational, and to also put a spotlight on the issues and the individuals who have to be a part of us being able to move forward. So we want to thank you for joining us today. You know, we're blessed that we have the opportunity to have a number of incredible individuals who are going to be sharing really important information and also helping us to have a better understanding of how we need to position ourselves in this new green economy, green jobs, clean economy, clean jobs that we know have all kinds of benefits to our communities because we're the ones that are hit first and worst, but also gives us an opportunity to make sure that we're building wealth inside of our families and inside of our communities because we know that the wealth gap still exists here in the United States. And you know, the President Biden actually last year in September, when he signed the executive order focusing on HBCUs, focusing on the expertise and the innovation and ingenuity that each one of you bring, and also the historical aspect of our institutions and uplifting those and making sure that we are providing the resources that are necessary to make real change happen. And often when executive orders are signed, we often take a step back and say, let me see if this is ever going to become real. Are my institutions, are my communities actually going to receive some of those resources? And the Department of Energy just recently committed over $100 million to support HBCUs. I say that's a great first step, but we need so much more to make sure that we are providing all the things that you need to help this country and this planet to be safer and be able to move forward in a really positive direction. So we're excited about what we get to share with you this evening. And we're also excited to be able to share space with you. So with that being said, let me pass the mic to our next presenter, which would be our Associate Vice President, the amazing, the incredible Simone Lightfoot.
It is so good being with all of you. I'm Simone Lightfoot, our Associate Vice President of Environmental Justice and Climate Justice here at the National Wildlife Federation. And we're so excited to be here with you, having this time to share with you green careers and opportunities, on-ramps for you to consider in this space. We would love to have you. We at the National Wildlife Federation has been committed to becoming an anti-racist organization. We have done a yeoman's job at being sensitive in our hiring processes, and we have been able to pull together some of our great talent to present to you this evening. And so I will not continue talking as much as getting on with the show. First, we have in this speed dating format 4 presenters who will take 3 minutes each to share with you their existence in this space, what brought them here. They will highlight their personal green career journey, their daily work life. They will talk about some of the professional trends that are on the horizon. They will also give tips on navigating race and other tools for students to participate and consider to participating in this event and considering as they go into specific career fields. They will speak to you very directly without prompts and from the heart. We will begin with, I'll just share with you their names so that they can go one after the other. We'll begin with Miss Rebecca Villegas, who's our Senior Program Manager here at the National Wildlife Federation's Environmental Justice Program. We'll then move to Miss Karina Newsom, who's our Associate Conservation Scientist here at the National Wildlife Federation Program. We have Keith Ward, who is our Director of Technology here at the National Wildlife Federation. And we have Miss Deborah Davies, one of our former interns who actually created this platform, this speed dating platform, and she's from Texas Southern University. So I will turn it over to Miss Rebecca Villegas.
Thank you so much, Simone, and I'm honored to be able to kick us off. As Simone had mentioned, my name is Rebecca Villegas, and I'm the Senior Environmental Justice Program Manager here at the National Wildlife Federation. And I've served in this role for almost 2 years now. And a few years back, I also served as the coordinator of affiliate and state engagement for a little over 2 years. So collectively, I've been with the Federation for about four plus years. And I'll be honest, before securing a position at NWF, I had no idea that this organization existed. I did not grow up with Ranger Rick or the NWF magazine. So when I got here, it was a bit of a culture shock. But after connecting with the staff and learning about the amazing programs, I fell in love, and I've been a proud NWF member ever since. Prior to these positions, I've worked in community-based organizations, including summer migrant programs and emission reduction programs across the state of Michigan since I was 15 years old. And I'm a proud daughter of migrants. And my parents migrated from Mexico a year before I was born. And I've been indebted, quite frankly, to them ever since for their bravery, their willingness to move away from everything and everyone that they knew to give their kids a better life. And I went to the University of Michigan hoping to continue to make them proud as an undergraduate student. And there I learned about ecological issues and climate change, and I knew that I needed to be part of the solution. And that's where my passion kind of ignited for environmental and conservation efforts. And after a few years of actually working in the field, I quickly realized that there were very few people in this field that shared my lived experiences. And it was tough for me to convey how or why I felt a certain way about the priorities we set as an organization and the way that we just engaged people overall. So I decided to equip myself with the knowledge, the skills, and everything necessary to be able to not only convey what I was experiencing at the time, but to find solutions that prevented others like me to feel the same way that I did. And so I went back to the University of Michigan for graduate school, and I dived into courses and training around diversity, equity, and inclusion and environmental justice with the hopes of coming back one day to the Federation to make a change. And in my role now as the Senior Environmental Justice Program Manager for our program, I'm able to live up to those dreams. And so I'm very grateful. In my role and my position, I analyze federal and state legislation and programs to develop policy proposals for ensuring fair and equitable impacts for communities of color and communities of lower wealth. I build capacity among the organization to participate and support an environmental justice and climate justice agenda through relationship building, project development, strategic planning, and fundraising. And I convene and support a cross-cultural collaborative of organizations and leaders of color across the nation to advance a shared vision and agenda around environmental and climate action. And I know I'm reaching my 3 minutes, and so I'll end with a few tips for folks. Oftentimes, who you know is equally, if not more important than what you know. So it's really critical, again, as folks are providing their contact information and are willing to speak to you in informational interviews, take those opportunities to build those relationships because they're going to be key. My second tip would be make sure you get your education paid for. There's so many programs and opportunities that you can able to leverage to be able to pay for your education, and I highly recommend folks to do that extra work to make sure that you're not indebted after school for folks that are students. And lastly, your identity and your experiences are your power. Those are the opportunities and pieces that you bring to the table that are important, that are imperative to the work that we're doing. So I'll end there, and I'll pass it to my colleague, Karina Newsom.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. It's truly an honor to be here. Thank you all so much for inviting me. And it's wonderful to speak to young people who are kind of entering these fields and making decisions about their futures. As was mentioned, my name is Karina Newsom, and I'm the Associate Conservation Scientist at National Wildlife Federation, based out of DC. And my background, as the title implies, is in conservation and in wildlife conservation in particular. And I grew up loving wildlife of all kinds, but not really being connected with the green spaces near me. And so it wasn't until I was very grown, at a big age, that I really got connected to the natural world where I was. And I began to realize the intersections between wildlife conservation and what we're doing to protect biodiversity and the species that live where we are, and the lived realities of people, and in particular, people from communities that are experiencing a lot of the same environmental issues that wildlife are facing, but disproportionately among other communities of people. And so the beginning of my career started actually in animal care. And so my undergraduate degree from Malone University was in zoo and wildlife biology. And during my undergraduate career and after graduating, I worked as a zookeeper in a variety of zoos, specializing in animal care, animal training, environmental education, and really kind of infusing my love for wildlife and sharing my love for wildlife with others. And so after kind of doing several years of the kind of human care side of wildlife conservation, I wanted to really contribute to some in the wild or in the natural ecosystems of wildlife science research. And so I went back to school and got my Master of Science in Biology from Georgia Southern University, where I focused on avian conservation or ornithology. And my research really is focused around wanting to help birds and other wildlife survive in a changing world. And that experience was life-changing. And again, it reinforced my love for wildlife, but also my passion for really addressing the way that we solve problems for wildlife, doing so in such a way that is embedded and rooted in environmental justice and realizing solutions for people as well. And so now I'm here at the National Wildlife Federation, where there are dynamite, absolutely dynamite individuals and teams like Rebecca and Simone and Mustafa and so many others who are doing the work to provide resources and competency and training for all staff, right? To be able to infuse and root our work in environmental justice and to co-create and co-problem solve with communities that are on the front lines of environmental issues, and to make our resources available to them. And so a lot of my work now is not so much in the field and out in the forests and the marshes where I used to do a lot of my work. A lot of it is administrative in nature, where I'm doing a lot of meetings. I'm doing a lot of coordinating between different states across the country and wildlife agencies across the country to understand how we can kind of coordinate our efforts so that we are problem solving, again, for wildlife and people in a way that is just and equitable. And one thing that I want to say, as far as the kind of future horizons of wildlife conservation, some of the skills that are really becoming very useful in wildlife conservation, you know, you don't necessarily have to be the animal science brain, right? If you're someone who loves coding and computer skills, that is becoming a very needed skill as far as technical skills are concerned in the realm of wildlife conservation, as well as things like geographic information systems, GIS, being able to do landscape analyses, as that's really critical to conservation on a larger scale, which is where most conservation is happening these days, especially as it concerns informing policy. but also cultural competencies and community engagement skills. The identity that you bring to the work is absolutely invaluable and so critical and important to us being able to problem solve effectively and creatively, just as Rebecca had mentioned. And so I am always doing everything I can to encourage young people from Black and Brown communities to follow their passions for wildlife conservation if they have it. And because much like Rebecca, you may not see a lot of people like yourself at the beginning. I think things are changing now where more people are more visible who are from Black and Brown communities. But regardless, find a mentor who shares identities with you that are essential to who you are and who are doing the kind of work that you are doing or want to do. Those mentorships have been incredible and incredible for me and so meaningful for my success in my career. So with that, I will pass it back. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Keith Ward. I'm the Director of Technology Solutions here at the National Wildlife Federation. And for all intents and purposes, that just seems like, I'm a tech guy that works for an organization to make sure that the lights stay on and everybody can continue to do their work. But what you have to do is you have to take yourself out of those boxes that people try and put you in, because my everyday work life does not center around technology, yet it centers around the actual people of the organization and the ways in which they can do their work effectively so that we can fulfill the mission here at the National Wildlife Federation. One of the biggest investments you will ever make in life, not just your career, will be in people. That is the capital that you're going to want to invest in, because like Rebecca stated, it's going to be more than just what you know, it's going to be who you know, but most importantly, how you treat people. When you build those authentic relationships, you don't want to have transactional relationships. As a tech guy, I've been in tech for around 2 decades now. I know I'm a really young, strapping looking person, but it's been 20 years since I've been professionally doing technology. And you have to take yourself outside of the box of resetting passwords, fixing the copier or the printer. What you have to think about is things such as levels of access. And that's one of the largest things that we focus here when it comes to environmental justice and tackling environmental injustices, are the levels of access that people who look like us have not been afforded. So whatever job you are looking at within any kind of space, especially in the conservation space, because you can fit into anywhere, because if you don't see the room there, you go make the room. Like, you belong everywhere that you want to be. What you want to do is think about, who does have access, who doesn't, who's in the room, who's not, whose voices have not been heard. And you make sure that you become an advocate for those people to be in space, because somebody has to be the trailblazer to take that first step to make sure that the room starts looking a little bit more like the world that we want to live in. Because I want you to understand one thing: there's a difference between the world that we do live in and the world that we would love to live in. And it is all of our responsibilities to get to the world we would love to live in. Even though that I do head a lot of the technology initiatives here, as well as support for our affiliates. I am the co-lead of our Black Employee Resource Group. I have sat on our equity and justice team, and the bulk of my work does go into making sure that this organization does stand firm on the declaration of being an anti-racist organization, because words are not enough. There must be actions behind it. And then there's constant follow through and evolution in the iterations of change. And you have to be willing to be a part of that change. And if anybody is ever in your way of progress, I'm gonna be perfectly frank with y'all, just move them the hell out the way, because you don't have time to be wasting, because we have people who are solution focused and solution minded and who want to see people thrive and enjoy life. And so what you want to do, no matter what your career is make sure that you build up your social capital. When you put your name or your word on something, you stamp that, you stand behind that, because your social capital is going to reverberate throughout your career and throughout your life. You'll get to the point to where when people mention your name, that's a dependable person. That's somebody I want to work with. If they say that this is the way to go, then I'm willing to look and investigate that, because I trust their word. You definitely want to make sure that you never, ever, ever stop growing. You will never know everything. And that's part of the journey of living. Taking consideration that the universe is expanding in all directions, in all places, faster than light can travel. That is how much knowledge you need to currently try to always give yourself, because you need to invest in yourself just as much as you invest into your career or into other people, because you are your number one priority. And if you are not well, you cannot do your job well. So make sure you give your time grace and space to say, hey, I love me. I'm doing a great job. And any place that you go, make sure that you leave it better than you found it. On to you, Deborah.
Ooh, that's tough to beat, Mr. Key. That's real tough to beat. Hi, everyone. My name is Deborah Davis. I'm a graduating senior at the illustrious Texas Southern University. It's truly an honor to be in front of everyone, these lovely individuals. That's really tough to be what everyone's saying, but just to sum up what everyone's saying is like, you have to be an advocate. Even though you go in spaces where you don't see individuals like you or profound people like you, or even people who don't even want to see you there, you have to own that room. Even if you are the outcast or shunned, you still have to make that space your space. And through my internship with the National Wildlife Federation, it's been an honor. As someone like me who aspired to be a criminal defense attorney, I never thought I would be even interested in environmental justice or climate and energy at all. But being open-minded and experiencing that and being exposed to that has allowed me to take that home with me to Houston, Texas, and implement ways I didn't experience or even know I could do. And as being the president of the Texas Southern University Beta Psi organization, which is a business professional organization, our job was to establish a tree ceremony. And we was also able to plant flowers or native plants at our tree. And I couldn't have done that without being a part of this wonderful internship that gave me exposure or knowledge to the plethora of different things that as a young generation, I can be able to make an impact in. And I was never even interested in green career fields, but being a part of this profound and outstanding organization, I was able to see that, wow, there's so many jobs that minority or color individuals are not even put into. But I told my members, you guys, there's so many green career field jobs that are actually intertwined with the majors and career paths you guys want to follow. Like I have a member who wants to establish or is majoring in computer science, but when I told her about the plethora of green career jobs, she was able to get an internship that also intertwines with green career and computer science. So it's just exposure and being open-minded to all this plethora of different things that we can be able to do to also impact our community. Like, in order for us to see the change, we have to be that change. And my job as the president of my organization, through the exposure and information I got from the National Wildlife Federation, I took that home to Houston, Texas, and I was able to plant native plants at our tree. No one has ever done that in the past presidency, but I was able to do that during my reign. And that was very outstanding because I never really thought I could see myself doing that. But through my confidence and my knowledge given through my phenomenal team of environmental justice people, I was able to do phenomenal things. And as of right now, I will be graduating in May. And I truly do thank my team because I will be mastering in urban planning and environmental policy because of their profound knowledge that they've given me. So for me to truly help my community in Houston, Texas, I have to be the change they want to see. So by being educated and exposed and open-minded and knowledgeable, I can truly help my community. Because this CUNY home, which is a low-income area, is right in the backyard of Houston, Texas. My organization, we have planted flowers and given ivy leaves to all the residents in that resident. So I just want to say thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to help my community and take it back to Houston, Texas, which is my home. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, Deborah Davies. You are the hope of our future. I feel like tearing up because I love when our young people come to us and we send them off better because of it, and they go on to replicate. So just thank you, thank you, thank you again, Deborah. We are moving on to what we call Once Upon a Time. And in the Once Upon a Time section, we're going to take 7 minutes with 3 speakers to talk to us from a storytelling standpoint. They're going to highlight their background. They're going to talk about the path that they took to a green career. They're going to offer up advice on how to navigate that big R called race. how to navigate that and how to emphasize the need for more HBCU and MSI students to choose green careers. But most of all, they're going to speak to you from the heart. And we're going to start with our Assistant Attorney General from the State of Washington Office of the Attorney General, and she's also a board member here at the National Wildlife Federation. Her name is Koa Barbie. And after Koa, we will move to an outstanding young lady who was recently promoted at NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. She's been a great friend to our program where we have co-created together. Her name is Miss Makeda Okolo. And following Makeda is the Honorable State Representative DeKeither Stamps out of Mississippi, who is a state representative 3 months out of the year when he's in formal session. The rest of the year, he is serving in that legislative capacity via his farm, his land ownership, and water delivery from Stamps Farm. So we will start with Miss Barbie.
Aloha mai kākou, I'm Koa Ka'ulu Barbie. I've been on the board of National Wildlife Federation for about 5 years now, and I've been very honored to be here. I'm honored to be here with all of you today. I grew up in Hawaii on the Big Island in a small area known as Puna, about an hour away from this very small town of Hilo. And when I grew up, our volcano there, Kilauea, just started erupting. You could see it from my house. We were affected by it. It was just like this amazing force of nature to see. And around the same time, the Hawaiian people were going through a cultural renaissance. My parents' generation were beat when they spoke Hawaiian in schools. There was a law that actually made it illegal to have a Hawaiian first name that was repealed just a few years before I was born. And so for me to have a Hawaiian first name is something that's really special and really wasn't, in my family in those generations of state law. And so from just a very young age, I was very aware of both the environment and the Hawaiian culture, which really are so intertwined. They're two different sides of the same coin because our culture, religion, and well-being were so integrated with the environment of Hawaii. That's what we relied upon to live. It was really hard to distinguish the two. And I've always honored that connection. And from a young age, I always knew that I wanted to work in the environmental field to protect that environment so that our culture could continue on. And so when I went to college, I first went to a film school. I wanted to make documentaries. I wanted to tell our stories and get it out there. Eventually I changed. I wanted to be a biologist. And so I went into that direction. I was lucky enough to get a Student Conservation Association fellowship, which is an amazing organization you should look into. I spent 3 months in a national park and 3 months with a congressperson in DC. And I realized you really need to understand the law in order to make it work for the environment and for the people. And so that's when I decided I should go to law school. And I went ahead and did that. And I thought Rebecca's advice to get your education paid for is so important and true. I worked the whole time that I was going through school, but I also spent a lot of time, almost like a full-time job, looking for those scholarships and those opportunities to get my funding. And I didn't have to pay for my school because of it. And it's not because I'm rich. I was still working hard to pay, to take care of myself, but I got the school part paid for because of those scholarships. So that's just wonderful advice because it is out there. So I went to law school, had it paid for, and really took advantage of all the opportunities I could to learn about environmental law, Native rights. I did fellowships and internships. And one day I thought, well, maybe I should focus on something more lawyerly. Seems like these environmental internships are great, but probably won't help me get a lawyer job. So I went to clerk for a district court judge. And that first day I sat down and talked with him, and he asked me, what is your passion? And I said, the environment. He said, well, why are you here working for me, a criminal judge? You should be working at an internship that focuses on the environment. And, you know, I told him, well, I thought I should get some experience. And he said, no, you need to go get an internship in the environment. And so he hooked me up with an internship at Earth Justice, an environmental law firm that had an office in Honolulu. And so I was like, all right, I guess, that's what I'll do. And it was an amazing experience. I got to work on so many different things, but like Keith said, I got to start building up that social capital where people got to know me, got to know my work, got to know my passions. And it ended up that after I graduated from law school, I got a job there. And I was able to do some amazing things, like get an injunction against the Navy for their sonar killing and injuring whales in Hawaii. I got to work on so many amazing cases. And now as an assistant attorney general in the state of Washington, I still get to do incredibly important work. I do notice that I'm often the only Indigenous or person of color in the room. And really, I think I'm able to draw on my background, provide those experiences that other people might not have, to make important points and provide perspectives that other people don't necessarily have. I mean, to us, it seems very natural or obvious, but to others, it might not. And so it's important to have people of color in those rooms to provide that really important perspective and tell our stories and show how our cultures and the environments or whatever issue we're working on are really intertwined. And it also shows me that we need more Black and brown attorneys. We need the people in the room and willing to speak up for the environment, fight for the environment, and tell our stories. And not just attorneys. We work with a lot of other professions, archaeologists, hydrologists, policy folks, planners. I mean, there's just so many opportunities out there. And I agree with what everyone has said so far. It's really about connections. Meet as many people as you can, take as many opportunities as you can. People are willing to mentor, just ask. If there's anything you need, the people that have gone down that path that you're headed down now, they might have the answers and they will be willing to help you. So I just wish you all very good luck and thank you for being in this field. And I'll pass it over to Makeda.
Thank you so very much, Koa. Thank you, Simone. It is absolutely an honor for me to be here with you this evening to share my journey with you, and hopefully there's some nuggets that resonate with you and you can take along as you continue your path as well. So my name is Makeda Okolo. I serve as the Director of Legislative and Intergovernmental Affairs for NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, as was shared previously. And I'm from St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands, which is a territory of the United States. It is also described as a modern day colony sometimes, and sometimes we do feel that way as an afterthought more than anything else. But that's not the point I want to focus on. I want to share with you how me growing up on a really small island just sort of served as the basis for why I should pursue a career focused on the environment. In the Virgin Islands, so much of our life, so much of our culture, so much of our very existence is just tied to our environment. We go to the ocean for healing. When we're sick, that's where we go to clear any inflammation out of our system. Our elders go to the ocean whenever their bones are aching. We eat fish. Our economy is based off of the environment. And so I recognized that really early and really was committed to finding a way to making sure that my children and your children and their children's children will also be able to benefit from that as well. And what that actually looked like was I had an aunt who was an environmental science teacher, and she would haul me to every beach cleanup, every mangrove planting, every possible environmental experience that you could imagine. My mom also would take me to the beach every single weekend, right? So it literally was a part of my identity. And so while that was true and I enjoyed that, I also realized really early that I was really interested in what was happening around me, right? So when there was a particular smell that was coming from a certain area, I was able to understand, hey, those are pipes that are eroding and that's impacting the community. When I realized that there was cancer concentrated, like from this one community, you kept hearing about family members and neighbors that had cancer and they were close to a refinery, that triggered for me. And I said, you know what, while in school, it was be an engineer or be a doctor. I said, you know what, there has to be another way to also find a career path that can be helpful and productive and also purposeful to me. And so I came to the Washington, D.C. area. I studied environmental studies, concentrating on policy in undergrad, and then did a dual degree in conservation biology and sustainable development, as well as environmental policy for grad school. And for me, I knew that I wanted to be the pivot point. I wanted to be able to translate policy to scientists and informed messaging while also doing the same thing in the reverse, right? How could I create a niche for myself so that I could serve a really good purpose? At the same time, through internships, as you're hearing a lot from many folks today, I did a congressional internship the summer between my freshman and sophomore year. And so I kind of joke around that I grew up on Capitol Hill, and it's true. I started when I was 18 or 19 and was there when I finished grad school and so on and so forth. But that opportunity allowed me to really think about, what is happening in real time where politics is concerned, where environmental policy is concerned, and sort of overlay that with what was happening from a very academic campus perspective, which was interesting from a number of dynamics, including that of race, right? At the time, I'm learning about conservation, and it's something that I believe in, but at the same time, I know for me personally, unless, the food is on the table, the lights are turned on, and you have gas in the car, it really felt like conservation and the environment was a rich white man's sport. And I felt very conflicted by that, because while I knew it was something important, I also needed to ensure that I was contributing in a way that was very purposeful, not only to me, but also to my race and people that come from communities like mine, underserved, poor, or low wealth, whatever is the catchphrase that you wanted to use. And so I guess my message to you is that while for a long time the environment and conservation has been a rich white man's sport specifically, I think there are many, many things happening around us that tell us that we don't have the luxury of not being at the table, at not being a voice in the room, and that we have to embrace the discomfort that often comes along with that, but to stand on the shoulders of others that are doing it to ensure that we do play a role. There's so much that's happening, right? We know of polluted water in Flint. In St. Croix, where I'm from, a refinery was literally spouting air onto people's rooftops and into their drinking water. There's flooding and there's storms and there's Category 5 hurricanes. And these issues are all impacting people that look like us and our children and our mothers and grandmothers. So it's imperative that we play a role, that you get engaged. And when I say get engaged, I want to impress upon you that being a part of the STEM ecosystem doesn't just mean being in a lab. While that is a fantastic path, and if that's for you, that's great. Also remember that it takes a machine in order to make science run, right? I know of an amazing person here at NOAA who's actually from the Pacific Koa. He's from Hawaii as well, who does really awesome graphic illustrations. And that helps to communicate our message so that it can land, so that people can appreciate it and understand it. And then what? Make sure that there's some action behind of it. So the time is now. And if anything, I want to leave 3 sort of things with you and in terms of advice and things that have been helpful for me. One, which you've heard already, is build your community, your mentors, your safe spaces, the people that you can vent with, the people that are going to write a letter and really advocate for you are those that will come from every juncture of your life. So even if it's one person from undergrad, from that internship, from the neighborhood, make sure that you're cultivating that, because your village will take you, on for the rest of your life. The second one is never take no for an answer. If you are hearing no, you are simply talking to the wrong person. Go above, go around, ask somebody else to do it for you. Never, ever, ever will you accept no for an answer, right? Because you belong, it is ordained, and you're supposed to be here. And then, to that end, the last one is we all struggle with vulnerability. We all struggle with various, types of imposter syndrome. But I want you to keep in mind, if not you, who? And if not now, when? So make the step, even when it's hard, and make sure and know that we will be here to help you along the way. So I will pause and pass it over to Key.
What a great presentation, because it's so important for us to continue this work of environmental justice. And I want to just start off by saying thanks to Dr. Mustafa Ali and Simone and the whole team, Gabby and Rebecca, who always keep me in line of all the events that we do, but more importantly, highlight great work all across the world. So just thank you for the opportunity to be here. And in the chat, go ahead and post what college you're in. I see Grambling State University is ruling the chat over here. Go ahead and post what school you're chiming in from, or where you're chiming in from today. But again, like I said, my name is Keither Stamps. I'm a state representative here in Mississippi. I grew up in a little small town called Learned, Mississippi, population 108. And the population's not even growing. It's a little small town right outside of Jackson. It's about 20 miles outside of Jackson, which is the capital city. But I grew up farming. And, when I was growing up, I was like, I got to find a way to get off this farm. This can't be the end of me. But I didn't know the acres of diamonds that I grew up with, because I joined the military thinking it was going to be a better option to get away from the farming lifestyle. And so I spent a whole career in the military. And when I retired in 2010, I came right back to the same farm in the same place. And actually, I spent the last few years in the military yearning to come back to the farm. And I realized over the years that we have gotten more disconnected from farming than we've ever been, because you go to the grocery store and you pick up all your food, and no matter what season it is, you can get every type of food in every season, when 20 or 30 years ago, you could only get what was in season at the grocery store at a specific time. So the world's changed when it came to agriculture, but it's opened up opportunities. Because if you look globally, what are some of the major opportunities that are out there for you to partake in? When you look at the global marketplace, one of the biggest questions that are out there is, how do you feed 9 billion people? We're on a trajectory to hit 9 billion as a world pretty soon, and the corporations are telling us that they can't do it. So that leaves a huge opportunity for us to get back to farming. Now, a farmer, when God created Adam, he created a farmer. And every other profession out there, I believe, nothing against every other profession out there, but I honestly believe that every other profession out there stems from farming. Because a farmer has to be a mechanic, a botanist, a veterinarian, he has to be a meteorologist. You have to, handle your own legal things. You have to be a business owner, an accountant, and you have to do all these different things yourself, and then birth the need. Let me have a son and send him to school to go do this piece of the farming and that piece, and everything else stemmed from that. And we've gotten disconnected the farther away of that stem that we've gotten over the years, that disconnection from the farming culture, because it's not just a lifestyle, it's not just a profession, it's a culture and a life calling that I think we've disconnected ourselves from. And that's what's caused us, through convenience, to be disconnected from the environment. And that's why I focus on growing farmers. We train, 25 to 30 farmers every 3 months to get their feet wet in the farming business in one of our operations in our farm. So some people grow food, I grow farmers, because I honestly believe that if we're going to take care of our planet, take care of our community going forward, we're going to have to get more farmers. And one of the big opportunities that is in place, and the reason why you see a lot of your local mom and pop restaurants really taking off right now, because the corporations know that the food prices are going to go through the roof. Look at the global wars that are out there. A lot of the wars that are happening right now and destabilizations around the world are happening because of food, fiber, and energy. So if you can produce food, and fiber is the connectivity that connects us all, and then you can solve energy problems. If you can solve big problems, you can make a whole lot of money in this world. And when you look at the price of a tomato in the grocery store right now, when you look at the price of a head of lettuce, the reason why a lot of the corporations aren't investing in restaurants right now, and there's an opportunity for local people to get restaurants, is because they know the food prices are going to go through the roof. And so look at Ukraine, that's about fertilizer. Really, at the end of the day, they can talk about spreading democracy and all these other things, but it's really about fertilizer. And so if you start producing these things locally, now you meet a need in the marketplace, and you can provide local food production to stabilize, first off, your house and your community, and meet the local business interests of your area. Because if you produce just the garnishes that are at your restaurant, that means they don't have to order them from California. They can order them right down the street. The tomatoes and other things that are being consumed in your local marketplace, you can make a lot of money. I mean, when I say a lot of money, you can make a lot of money with local food production in your local community. And from that, all careers in farming don't have to deal with just you and the dirt and growing things. There's science, there's engineering, there's math, there's other pieces to the puzzle where you can live a comfortable life. You don't necessarily have to be on the back of a tractor. One of the other problems you can solve is with the Green New Deal. A lot of farmers have an issue with the Green New Deal because the science problem hasn't been figured out yet. How do I run a farm without a tractor that runs on diesel? How do I operate this machinery? How do I produce my goods without the core pieces of machinery, which is a tractor? Or the type of tractor I have. That's a science problem that hasn't been fixed yet. So if you can get into the research piece, like a previous presenter said, if you can get in the lab and figure that problem out, you're gonna have a game changer at place. If you can figure out how to run a farm without a diesel tractor. And the same thing with on the energy side of the fence. Everyone in the fossil fuel industry, all my natural gas providers, they all know the minute that we figure out how to store electricity overnight in a high capacity and high delivery format, the natural gas industry is over. So instead of fighting people trying to get them to submit to the Green New Deal, let's take some folks and say, hey, let's figure this science problem out. Because it's just a science problem that hasn't been figured out. How do you do it? How do you come to a place like Mississippi where you have a power grid that's weak across the whole state, where 70% of our energy, our electricity, comes from a natural gas plant? So it doesn't matter if you convert your whole house to being electric. The electricity that you're using in your house comes from a natural gas plant, by and large. So how do you solve some of these science and energy production things that are out there? So just expand. My whole comment today is really just expand your horizon of what is possible in this green space. I say get into farming and agriculture because it's a huge opportunity out there. But even beyond the agriculture piece, if you can solve some of these science problems and you can, put your trademark and your name on some of these technologies and your institution, every HBCU should link their science department with their school of business and innovate. It's a reason why Florida State makes a lot of money. They invented Gatorade, for goodness sakes, and they market it. I mean, so take the institutions that we have in our HBCUs, get in those labs, solve these problems, go over to the School of Business, find you some partners over there to monetize and get it in the right format it needs to be to deliver to the global marketplace. And let's prove that HBCUs can solve major problems in our country. So I put my contact information in the chat. Anybody want to reach out to me? I'm out here, working all the time. So if you want to reach out to me, feel free. And I appreciate all the presenters that have presented today. Thank you so much for the information that you've shared. I'm gonna go back and watch the replay and take copious notes. And thank you to Simone and the environmental justice team at the National Wildlife Federation, and Dr. Ali for the leadership, both inside the organization, but just as a man. I appreciate you for your leadership, sir. And I look forward to working with you in the future. God bless and Godspeed. And I think the next segment is Gabby.
Thank you so much. Thank you for lifting up our HBCUs and our MSIs. The answers absolutely are there. Next, we are going to go over to our next artist. We're very excited. As I shared with you, my boss, Dr. Ali, values artistry in conservation and our environment. And we get the opportunity to bring to you Gabriel Garcia, who is out of LA, California.
Hello everyone, my name is Gabriel Garcia and I'm a musician based out of Los Angeles, California. First and foremost, I'd like to say thank you to the Environmental Justice Program and to the National Wildlife Federation for having me here. Thank you so much. It's an honor for me to be part of this roundtable because I believe that nature itself is a medicinal tool for the soul and that all people deserve access to this regardless of whatever race, gender, ethnicity, culture, or income class one comes from. This first song that I'm going to play for you is called El Corrido de Berta Cáceres. It's a Mexican corrido composed by my father, Felix Garcia. I'm going to play it for you guys and then talk a little bit about it afterwards. All right. Voy a cantar unos versos de lo profundo de mi alma a una mujer muy hermosa de Honduras, Tegucigalpa. Los sicarios del estado la mataron en su casa. Departamento Intibucá, tus ríos están llorando porque no miran a Berta en aguas del Río Blanco. Los gorrioncillos están tristes, ya no se escuchan sus cantos. Fecha del 4 de marzo, a inicio de primavera, año del 71, nació una brava guerrera, guardiana de nuestros ríos, bosques, montañas y selvas. Del estado pensaron que te mataron, lo que no se dieron cuenta es que te multiplicaron. Mujeres en resistencia brotaron por todos lados para celebrar tu vida. No te vamos a llorar Entre cantos y protestas te vamos a recordar. Todas las mujeres lencas ya ocuparon tu lugar. La primavera te trajo, la primavera te lleva a lo alto de las montañas a brillar como una estrella. Vas a vigilar tus ríos de la rapiña minera. All right, that was El Corrido de Berta Cáceres. Berta Cáceres was an indigenous Honduran environmental activist who fought to protect her land, the environment, and the indigenous Lenca people of Honduras. She was later assassinated for all her work of protecting the rivers, the rainforest, and her people. My dad, who migrated from Mexico to the United States in his early 20s, composed a song in honor of her. This song is very dear to me, not only because my dad composed it, but because it's important to remember and honor those who dedicated their lives to protect the environment. So once again, thank you for having me here. If you have any questions or want to reach out to me, you can find me on Instagram under Gabriel_Garcia_official, or feel free to DM me right here on Zoom. Thank you so much for having me, and let's hear it for the next speaker.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. That was phenomenal. We appreciate that musical interpretation and the connectivity to your father. That's super powerful. Next up, we are going to move pretty fast. We are running a little behind on our start time, and so we are going to move to our next 6 speakers who will bring you 3 minutes each, and they're going to talk to you about the keys to success through the lens of race. Keep bringing up race, don't I? Through the lens of race, boldly shared tips. They'll bring you tools. They'll bring you tripwires and techniques that have proven beneficial to achieving education, graduation, and navigating majority white spaces while advancing their careers. They will share with you helpful hints to interviewing, to transitioning, to building those soft skills, and to maintaining high professional standards. First up, we're going to have Miss Crystal Jennings, and Crystal directs our youth leadership program here at the National Wildlife Federation as it relates to our Earth Tomorrow program. We also have, after Crystal, we have Miss Lindsay Bassigal, and Lindsay handles our communication. She is our coordinator for our Healing Our Waters Great Lakes Coalition out there in the Great Lakes states. Following Lindsay, we have Mr. Ode Salim, who is our staff attorney there at the Great Lakes Center. He also leads our legal clinic there at the University of Michigan. Following Ode, we have Miguel Ordena. He's our senior manager for community science at the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles. And Miguel is also one of our board members here at the National Wildlife Federation. So we look forward to him sharing. We have Antonio Cosme after Miguel, who is our Detroit Education Coordinator there with our D-LEAP program in the Great Lakes region. And we will round out our convening this evening with Mr. Daryl Haddock. And Daryl is the education director at the West Atlanta Watershed Alliance, who will share some education ideas and suggestions for young people. So let's go ahead and turn it over to Miss Crystal Jennings.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Simone. And I have to say, I was a little nervous coming behind all this great advice, but that musical selection definitely helped to calm my nerves and to get me inspired to share the advice that I put together for you all today. So thank you again for that. When I first started for working in NWF, it was about 12 years ago. I constantly felt out of place. I'll be very honest, even with having a degree from Spelman College. So if you're from Spelman, please throw a hello in the chat. In environmental science, I still felt like that wasn't enough. I was constantly questioned about why NWF, especially because it was very obvious. I'm a Black person. I love my community. I love nature. I love the environment. So that looked like a formula for environmental justice work. And I felt like people just didn't understand that environmental justice is not just in a box. So I received some really great advice from one of my advisors, and she basically said that we need to be all people, but particularly Black people, people of color. We need to be in all places. We need to be represented. We need to be heard in multiple areas from multiple platforms. So she really encouraged me to stick around at NWF. I was really fortunate to, I started out in the DC area in our advocacy center, and then I moved back to Atlanta, and that's where I started to connect with the Earth Tomorrow program. During that time, and here's one of my first keys to success right here, I was really, really fortunate to connect with some really great mentors. I know you hear it a lot, and I really tried to be original here, but having good mentors. And I really think that it happens very organically, or at least it has for me in my experience. I wasn't looking for a mentor, but I found it, and I found it through people that I worked with, through people in my community, through folks that we partner with through my work, even within, my family, people who I didn't even know really had an interest in this work. When they realized how passionate I was about this work, they started to find different ways to support me in my endeavors. So definitely key number one is find your crew, find the people that are out there to support you. I will also say that I think it's very important, I started out talking about belonging. And I think someone's already said this, but definitely owning the space and doing it with confidence. It took me a minute to really grow into not feeling like I had to justify what I'm doing working for a company like NWF. Because I could have went and worked for other organizations that were more focused on just environmental justice, but I also felt like this was an opportunity to really make a difference in an organization that hadn't really broken into this space. And I'm so fortunate because now look at where we are. We have a whole environmental justice team led by Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali, and this is a great time to be working for NWF. So I'm very fortunate I held on. I will say that's my last piece of advice. It's just perseverance. Stick with it. You might have to take several different paths to get to where you want to go, but don't give up. Stay encouraged. And again, just keep thinking about, the impact that you can have if you stay in there, if you hang with it. And that's my story. And thank you all for giving me a chance to share some of those keys to success with you. I will pass it to Lindsay. I believe that's our next speaker.
Hi, folks. Chokma Sohochwa Lindsay Chikashasea Animantili Anishinaabeyaki. So I'm Lindsay. I'm an Indigenous woman, Chickasaw specifically, from Michigan as well. I did my undergrad at a very small school, Aquinas College, in communications and women's studies, and then went on to my master's abroad in Ireland. And I specifically focused on looking at the intersections of environmental violence in the context of Indigenous women and extraction zones. So talking about things like pipelines and that. So that's my background. But in terms of my current work, I work as the communications coordinator for the Healing Our Waters Great Lakes Coalition. So basically we're a group that advocates for Great Lakes policy at the federal level, and things like water infrastructure, replacing lead pipes, all of these big kinds of issues that we hear a lot about. So anyway, that's me. But in terms of my advice, and nobody has said this yet, which is not surprising because a lot of people on this call probably struggle with this, but my best advice is to maintain boundaries and just to have boundaries, to both have boundaries and maintain boundaries. I think especially as people within the BIPOC community, it's very easy to get pulled in many different directions. Lots of people, of course, in the conversation around equity, a lot of people want to prove how equitable they are. A lot of organizations and institutions want to show, like, look at how equitable we are. And that means that a lot of times the labor is asked of staff from BIPOC communities to do that kind of work. And that work can be very emotionally draining. It can be very mentally draining. So my best piece of advice really is to just have boundaries and really maintain them. It's maybe a bit different with folks being students right now. That's a bit of a different context. But like for me, that's saying like, I don't work on weekends, like, or I don't work after 5 o'clock. Like after 5 o'clock, nope, I'm done, I'm out. So nobody's trying to contact me. I'm not going to pick up my phone. I will not be answering emails. So it's just really important and good to have, especially with all the things that are going on in the world. Like we have police brutality going on all the time. For Indigenous folks, it's their children being dug up in mass graves from residential schools. You know, there are all these big emotional things happening. There's a pandemic that's still happening. So really taking time for ourselves and to really honor ourselves is so important. And it's a way to also push back against white supremacy in our institutions, that we don't have to be perfect. Everything doesn't have to be urgent. And to really kind of, yeah, push back against those things. That's just my best advice, is take time for yourself, honor your emotions, honor your feelings, and rest when you need to. And I will pass it to O'Day.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. And thank you, Simone, for inviting me to this, and to the environmental justice team, obviously, at National Wildlife Federation. So I want to focus on, of course, I'm an attorney who focuses on environmental justice. I've been working on environmental justice for a very long time. Nothing that I'm going to suggest is easy, but I can tell you that it works and it's necessary. So the first thing I want to mention is accountable supervision. Most of you, if not all of you, will be supervised well before you do the supervising. And one of the main cruelties of the workplace, of course, is implicit bias. One way to tackle implicit bias is to insist on supervision that's periodic, that's in writing, that's transparent about what's going well and what isn't and why, that provides space for your feedback on that supervision to make sure that the supervision is working for you, and to provide space for feedback on what can change at the organization to allow you to do better. You don't have to just remain fixed within an organization as is and not insist on it growing along with you and to allow you to grow. The next thing I want to mention is the little things are the big things. Is there an informal book club for challenging environmental justice books that you and your fellow employees can go through? Is there funding for brown bag lunches where you can invite speakers who will bring all kinds of perspectives to the organization and who will allow people to see the racial and ethnic and linguistic diversity out there doing good environmental work? Is your organization, is the one that you're working for, recruiting interns from HBCUs? Do they just have an equity statement on their website, or are they actually going to Grambling, to Howard, to other HBCUs and actually doing the real recruiting on the ground to make sure that their staff look like what their equity statements want their staff to look like? So be that person, I think, who engages in reform from the outside in until you can reform from the inside out. And the last thing I'll say is find ways to serve and to make sure that your organization is serving. I think we're all aware of just how important service is, especially since a lot of environmental justice happens as folks providing service to each other. Find ways to take your organization that may be majority white and make sure that that organization is providing the kind of service that can benefit marginalized groups. Suggest and lead volunteer activities, find pro bono opportunities, invite pro bono opportunities to the organization. Donations are good, but should never be confused with actual service on the ground and working alongside communities. And I think insisting that your employer have that accountable supervision, that it does the small things right, not just the big things, and that it engages in service in a way that benefits the most marginalized in our society are three things that would make any environmental law employment environment a lot, or I should say environmental employment environment a lot better than it already is. So I'll end there at the 3 minutes, and I'm going to pass it to Miguel.
Thank you, Jose. My name is Miguel Eliñana. I'm a senior manager of the Community Science Office at the Natural Museums, where I co-lead a program where we are working to connect our community members in Los Angeles with science and nature in accessible ways, and challenging ourselves to do that in more equitable, inclusive ways. And so this field in itself, the community science, some people also call it citizen science, has grown over the years. And us as an institution, we're doing things like co-creating projects rather than how it started, this field, which is academic scientists kind of coming up with ideas that are interesting in the scientific community or important to conservation, and then trying to prove that to the community and push our projects on them. And now our institution is doing it in different ways where it's more inclusive, equitable, and getting the community involved. That's not how I started my career though. This is a white dominated field. I'm a scientist by training, wildlife biologist, meaning that I go out in the field and do wildlife research in a box with my scientist friends and write a paper and feel like I made a contribution. That was not satisfactory enough for me as a person of color within this field, someone who grew up not enjoying and receiving environmental education and almost falling through the cracks because of that. My recommendation is to bring your whole self to work if you can, because it makes you stand out. And especially in organizations like the Naturalist Museum and the National Wildlife Federation, who are celebrating these lived experiences of people of color, of underrepresented groups. I think it's only going to get you farther and allow you to make a bigger impact. So I've strategically transitioned in the community science field to make a bigger impact. I've strategically decided to join the National Wildlife Federation board because that is another white dominated space, and to make sure that I create a seat at the table, not just for myself, but for people that come after me that look like me, and make sure that our voices are heard and why our voices should be heard. And so those are kind of my main recommendations. Be bold, always challenge yourself, challenge others. And when you can, and when you do receive the power that we all deserve, to hold everybody accountable, to do things better, to continue to always have a growth mindset, and work hard. You embrace your family culture of putting family first, working hard. That'll get you far. Yes, there's not a lot of great role models out there. I'll end here, but you have role models all around you. Your tia, your grandfather. Embrace those role models. That'll get you far until we have more role models like Rebecca and Mustafa out there to follow behind. I'll stop there. Thank you so much. And Antonio, I think you're next, right?
Yeah. How are you guys doing? I'm actually gonna do like a little quick how I came to be here and what we do. So yeah, this is me. I was born and raised in Southwest Detroit. It's a pretty polluted area. As you know, environmental racism is a very real thing. So hazardous waste facilities overlapped with Michigan and Detroit's Black population. You can see those things concentrate pretty well. It also concentrates heavily in communities with high poverty. And Detroit happens to be a community of very high poverty. So I grew up in a pretty like polluted area, and that was something that really kind of early woke me up. But I was in college. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was studying pharmacy. And the 2008 financial crisis hit. And that disproportionately impacted Detroiters, Detroit being the blackest major city in the country. And literally in that time period after 2008, half of all Black wealth was lost. And that actually impacted me and my family as well. So we lost our home in that period. And that really woke me up as to like, oh, there's a big problem in this society, in this world, this kind of predatory lending that was happening there really woke me up. So I came to study economics a lot, particularly neoliberalism and the history of like the United States to Latin America. I went to El Salvador and studied with Zapatista people. And it was really like that experience that opened my eyes to what some of the structural changes that are needed in our society. And so I graduated in 2012, right when Detroit was going into bankruptcy as a result of that predatory lending that was happening in 2008. I got heavily involved in a Rise Up, which is a Chicano indigenous hip hop and art collective. We started organizing popular education events and all sorts of activities around emergency management, around water shutoffs, around housing foreclosures, around the takeover of our public schools, in all of the ways in which disaster neoliberal capitalism was kind of destroying our communities. I started doing a lot of graffiti, like radical graffiti at the time frame, and there's some photos of it. We ended Columbus Day in the city. That was something I'm really proud of, making a difference on, but painted a lot, really popularized a lot of certain ideas. Like, I mean, when I started doing this, nobody knew the native name of Detroit. Very few people did. Now you find among the leftists, at least, like everybody knows, Wawiatanong is the indigenous name for Detroit. So real proud of that work in the city. But did a lot of community art, you know, taught kids community art, did a lot of community organizing. The bankruptcy process happened really fast and it kind of got transferred into the water shutoff sort of crisis. So I was heavily involved in trying to stop water shutoffs in my neighborhood. We literally put our bodies in the way, and the 6 police officers came to make sure this like pregnant woman's water got shut off in my neighborhood. So it's terrible situations happening in Detroit and all over impoverished communities in this period of extreme, you know, wealth inequality that we live in now. I was arrested in 2015 for painting "Free the Water" on a water tower. You could check the hashtag out if you want to find out more about that situation. But that really prompted me to like get out of activism. Started growing food. So I appreciate the homie who was uplifting agriculture as a future. We started to transition some of these lots, empty lots, into beautiful spaces. Started beekeeping, started getting in touch with nature, started doing this wild ricing with native people, started a group called Black to the Land. And it was really that work with Black to the Land that got me hired at the National Wildlife Federation. And I run the Detroit Leadership and Environmental Education Program, where we take kids outdoors and connect them with nature, take them to visit wetlands and talk about like wetland destruction through colonialism, do some citizen science activities. And I appreciate the homie also for uplifting the Green New Deal earlier, because that is a really cool solution that's out there. Like it's a kind of an amorphous term, but it could be very meaningful if we make it meaningful. Yeah, so thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Antonio. We appreciate you more than you know.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Mr. Daryl Haddock.
Am I on?
You are.
Thank you. Appreciate you allowing me to be with you today. So I bring you greetings from Atlanta, Georgia, the ancestral land of the Muskogee, and I am the Environmental Education Director for the West Atlanta Watershed Alliance, which is a longstanding partner with NWF in Atlanta on the Earth Tomorrow program and other initiatives. So I guess you brought me here to talk a little bit about education and hopefully drop some education nuggets. I've worked in all the sectors and I co-sign with everybody and what they said, especially about grit, determination, and perseverance. But in terms of maybe what I could share specifically on what might be inspirational in terms of designing your own educational experience, I guess I would add that the educational system tends to maybe move you toward specializing. And so we have to choose between whether or not we want to be a hydrologist or a chemist or a climate specialist or even work in agricultural science. And what I would suggest and what ended up working best for me was I had to be pretty nimble because I really wasn't a really great math student. And so when I got to college, I wanted to be a marine scientist, oceanography major at that time. And when I got to, classes like physics and calculus and Cal 2 and 3, I started to really have a lot of anxiety. And so I actually switched my major to geography. And the geography, major being a social science, really allowed me to pursue the opportunities of still being a professional scientist and a water scientist, but, allowed me a different path. And so I would say, be nimble, be willing to make changes, be willing to kind of read the land and decide how you may want to, chart a new path for yourself. I would also add that you might want to start thinking about diversifying your teachers. Intergenerational learning really plays well in our communities. We know that, indigenous peoples, earth peoples, we value our elders in such a way that allows us to, learn and grow and participate and be facilitated by people we care about. And so really look to a broad cross section of your teachers so that you can have multidisciplinary learning. And think of everyone in your network as being a subject matter expert. Sometimes that white privilege allows us to kind of think of who the experts are. And the experts come out of, the ivory tower, or, and we have experts that have lived experiences in our communities that don't necessarily have PhDs and master's degrees, or some of them haven't even gone to school, but they can tell you about soil science and plant science, and they can describe what's going on with tides and different coastal patterns. So I would say, think about, diversifying your teachers. And lastly, I guess I want to share, play as you serve, as you learn. The value of play can't be underscored. And having that kind of lighthearted, opportunist, mentality, that personality that really allows you to enjoy what you're doing, especially in the environmental conservation space, is an asset. It really is something that will serve you well, because you want to be outside. You want to take time to recreate. There are physical, emotional benefits to being in the environment, to being in nature, to connecting in nature. And so if you're only doing all of the heavy scientific kind of, cranial work, and you're not enjoying that you could go rafting, or that you could, take hikes, or that you can bike to work instead of driving to work and being on the highway. Like, if you're not figuring out how you can play as you learn and as you do the work, it's going to be heavy, hard, tedious work for you. And also find opportunities to serve. Be a change agent. Find ways to solve problems even as you learn. Project-based learning is something that, is talked about a lot, in the educational research. And I can't underscore that service learning is such a powerful tool that you might want to think about. So those might be the three things that I would leave you, but everyone on today's call gave amazing insights, gave some really great reflections about their personal and professional histories. And I hope that, the little bit that I was able to, add to the soup will be beneficial to you all. So thank you for allowing me to spend time with you today.
Thank you, Mr. Haddock. We appreciate you more than you know as well. And at this time, we are going to turn it over to Miss Gabby Rivera. Thank you so much, Gabby.
Hi, Simone. Thank you so much. Mari Kompuche, Pulamien, Mapuche Nyeng, Gabi Pinyen. Hello in the Mapuche language. Our indigenous ancestral homelands are occupied by the nation states of Chile and Argentina in South America. I'm Gabby Rivera, the Environmental Justice Coordinator here at NWF. And I just have a few closing notes before the event closes tonight. Today's convening has been recorded and it's going to be sent to registrants after it's ready to be shared out. In addition to sharing the recording, we're also going to be sharing all of the resources that were gathered and discussed today, including the toolkit that we've prepared, which contains job search tips and opportunities, as well as professional development resources. We also have a Clean Economy Coalition of Color listserv, our CECC listserv. The CECC is an alliance of some of the nation's most insightful BIPOC leaders and advocates of color who are committed to amplifying ideas, recommendations, and solutions that uplift the priorities and economic interests of historically marginalized communities by guiding clean energy economy policies and implementation. Our listserv is an optimal platform to share out opportunities, updates, and receive information on resources that can help build capacity and power amongst our communities. If you want to be included on the CECC listserv, please add your email and name into the chat at this time. If you have any questions or if you want to contact us, you can do so by emailing me. I'm putting my email into the chat right now. And if you want to learn more about our program, view our reports and resources that are available online, you can go to our landing page, which I've also shared in the chat. And I just want to say thank you so much to everyone here who's joined us tonight from the NWF Environmental Justice, Climate, and Community Revitalization Program. Thank you for sharing out your perspectives and experiences related to navigating the green career space as BIPOC students, professionals, and individuals. Thank you so much to everyone, and I hope you have a nice rest of your evening.